Welcome back, everybody, to your daily update on the state of the Volcando Empire. Although maybe it's no longer an empire, who knows? I'm here to talk to you about Dust of Dreams, Book 3, chapters, what's that? 13 and 14. So the first two chapters in Book 3 of Dust of Dreams. I read them today, and we'll continue with those on Monday, on Tuesday, with Book 3. So I guess we'll be done with Dust of Dreams by the end of next week, which, it's pretty cool. And then we'll move on into the Crippled God, so y'all can start thinking about what I should do once I'm done with the Crippled God, right? Carcanas, novels of the Malazan Empire, just, general dicking around until the God is Willing is released. I have no idea. So maybe let me know what's your ideas for that. But now let's get into this. Cheers. And yes, first part a bit here is that obviously in those first two chapters of Book 3, the Malazans and the Letheri are not present. We only catch up with everyone. We kind of missed the last round when we were just sticking with, mostly sticking with the Barghast. And now we're back with others. So we catch up with, the Parish, we catch up with the Kundril, we get some more of Bolkondo, Calith, and the Kachain Chamal, and obviously what's going on with the Icarium multiple personality thing there. So let's go and see what we can, glean from that. And I feel like the first thing that's interesting is how the how to say. All right, I forgot. We start with also with Sin and Grub in whatever parallel world or whatever. And the interesting bit there is obviously the discussion on how Grub came to be when Sin is trying to explain how both of them are different, and she tries to explain that Grub was not actually born as a human, but is basically a creation of the chain of dogs. I'm not sure if that's ever going to be addressed again. I just love the idea of this that a tragedy, if a tragedy is large enough, it can actually, personify in some way, and Grub being that personification is definitely an interesting look at how things are made by, events, and in like an abstract way. Apart from that, we also obviously see that Sin is getting more and more mad, but also they meet dinosaurs, and that's cool, because dinosaurs. But mostly, I think it's time to look at the Kachain Chamal and Calith, her dream where she meets Iskar Jarak and the Bridge Burners. And I want to look at that for a moment, because there's something very important there when we learn basically that the Bridge Burners have taken over like the job of Hood, because we know Hood is no longer Lord of the Dead. He stepped out and did what he ever he's doing now, like, getting beheaded and shit like that. But what that also means is that how we think about death, right? So the idea of death, in this case Hood, being this faceless guy in a robe, but normally you only see the robe, you don't even see his face. I mean, obviously at this point we know that he is or was Jakut. But having a group of soldiers, in this case the Bridge Burners, having them all take over that job of welcoming or like accepting people at the gates to the realm of the dead, has this amazing aspect that that death has all these different faces and not just this one devoid of emotion kind of skull, basically, which you also see obviously in other personifications or other depictions of death. We often have that, Grim Reaper kind of guy. But yes, there can be compassion in death. There can be, healing in death in a way. If you die after a long sickness with pain, with a lot of pain, then maybe that can actually be helped. There can be rage in death. There can be all these different faces and facets. And having soldiers, having the bridge burners who have all these different aspects take over that role can actually, and I mean we see that in there already. It's like you kind of know that the kind of death you face is the kind of death that is the one that's appropriate for you, which is more than you could say about Hood, where you always get the same, robe guy, basically. So that can make dealing with death or accepting death as an inevitable consequence of life easier. And I feel that we can, as human beings outside of the Malazan world, we can take something from that. If we, think about what death is or how death can manifest in a way in our lives. So yeah, that whole idea I feel is well worth thinking about and talking about. We'll learn more about death in a second, because obviously Iskar Jarak, the Iron Prophet, which is nice that she calls him Iron Prophet as well. He promises help and he sends help. And the help he sends is the remnants of that Jagad army. And you remember that, and this is, I feel, the interesting bit there, because we know from Toll the Hounds, when that Tist Idur Tulas Shorn talked to Calor, we know that the could only fielded one army when they tried to go to war against death. And now we learn that their commander at that point was Hood, who then apparently betrayed them and took over the job of Lord of Death. Now, there's more to that, obviously. But that's a different thing to think about. But now we meet his last compatriots, and they go and fight the enemies of the Kachain Jamal, whom we still have not actually seen. I mean, we can, build up an image of who they might be. But yeah, we have not actually seen, and this is like interesting, like the way Erickson builds, like slowly builds us up. Like first time we only see the clouds on the horizon, then we see a bit more, and so yeah, we can kind of guess who those people are, but at least some of them are now dead, because apparently 14 fighting Jackot are quite a thing. So there's that. Yes. So I guess we come to the point where, obviously, where like the whole thing of Caliph accepting her role as Destriant of the Kachain Jamal becomes more of a form. She actually comes more and more into her role, grows into her role, accepts her role, and that's a good thing. We still need to figure out who her, like, still needs to find her sword, mortal sword, and her shield anvil, but this is only a question of time. Gods, I'm tired today. I'm sorry. I'll try to keep it quick. All right. What else was there that I felt was important to talk about? Yeah, we see that Tanakalian is this envy? Is he just? I feel like the dynamic between him, between Tanakalian and Krukava, is like a weird one. Is he like incredibly cynical and incredibly arrogant at the same time? Or is he a sincere character? I'm still not quite sure about that. Like how much he is like talking himself into this role that he's building up there. I don't know. I feel this is something that still needs a bit more discussing later on when we have more of it. And when we also get more of the depiction of the male side the um, of the Volcando with Avalt and that Chancellor, their supreme arrogance, they're like really like over the top. This is at this point definitely over the top, and it's played for that contrast between the sort of hyper civilized I don't want to super decadent Volcando who completely underestimate the gray shields, gray helms, I mean, and are paying the price for that. Which brings us, on the other hand, to Queen Abrastal, who has hired herself a bunch of Barghast, apparently, but also has this long talk with war leader Gaul, and they make peace because she apparently actually knows what's going on, is a worthy ruler, which speaks volumes. Once again, and but yeah, she accepts that there are parts of the upper class of Volcando who were trying to take as much as possible from the burnt tears, and are maybe punished just justly in a way. We'll see where that is going. I think that one thing that is important to look at was during the attack of the Kundril burnt tears. We have that young guy we met before. The what's his name? Vedith, the young leader that was like the guy who who led his crew to take out that town when the Kundrils first started their attacks, and now he's sent to as a war leader for that larger group, and he dies the dumbest death ever. Literally the dumbest death ever, because his horse stumbles and he breaks his neck. But before that, we have him thinking about that he doesn't want to do that because, that idea of the loneliness of command, the responsibility that comes with knowing that some of the people that follow you will die no matter what you do. And we then see that reflected in War Leader Gaul when he learns of Wedith's death. And this is probably the most heartbreaking scene in those two chapters is when Gaul talks to his wife Hanavat, and we see how they are. I feel this is like the super interesting thing. Like as I said before, Stephen Erikson. Sometimes people say that Stephen Erikson can't write romances. What he definitely can write is long-term relationships, whether it's Picker and Blend, or it's Torvald and Tessera, or now Gaul and Hanavat. The way they manage to sort of overcome their the rift that can come with being married for 40 years, being married as children with obviously not that much choice, I guess, in the whole thing, and being obviously also the leader in this nomadic warrior culture, and how they manage to be with each other, and how Erikson describes it, how they how the death of that young warrior hurts him so much because it connects to the death of their firstborn son, who died because children die in that kind of culture. I mean, children die everywhere, but in that kind of more rough life of that nomad warrior tribe, their chances are even higher that children die. And how they then, without talking about it, decide to forget and take him out of that piece of pain out of their lives, how that now comes back to haunt him, and she then actually is there for him, and that is like, holy shit, that is just so incredibly well done. It's like, makes me cry every time I read it, because it shows that actually, with enough, caring, compassion, and respect for the other person, such things can be worked out. At least, up to a point, I guess. We'll see how that continues in the upcoming chapters, but I feel at this point, this is just like so incredibly well done. Yeah, I have like a lot of respect for Steven Erikson, that he manages to, not only pull off, we always look at Malaz and we say, like, these big battles, they're incredible. And yes, you go to, I don't know, Igatan or the Black Coral, or even that opening battle at the Siege of Payon. The action is great. The one-on-one sword fights, that stuff's great. The hilarious moments with Bug and Tehol, all of that is great. But he's also really good at these more silent, tender, emotional scenes. And that's something that, not a lot of like fantasy authors can pull off that well. So the respectful, tender, compassionate way he describes that scene is something that like really gets me every time. All right. Now let's look into something less fun. That being Icarium. So apparently things are not all well. And we heard that before, that they were followed or hunted. And I guess at this point we can kind of figure out who is hunting the ghosts, not the ghosts, but these people that the ghost Icarium watches. And because we get a look into his mind. And yes, of course, it is Terralak Veed, obviously. Now, how does he fit into all of this? We don't know, but I wanted to have a look at like his thought process, because we already knew, it was mentioned before that he killed his sister because apparently she cheated on him. And just that ongoing way it is described here, like from his point of view, how he apparently cheated on her with her sister. And then she cheated on him, maybe in revenge, maybe just for another reason, and how he justifies that in a way. How he's like, yeah, that was nothing with her sister, but what she did, that drove the knife, and so I had to kill her. And this, his sexual morality still is oftentimes like that. It's when you have this point that like for promiscuity is something that is kind of acceptable or whatever for men, but is absolutely frowned upon with women. And you have that even more in, like, I'm not quite sure if I'm fully happy with the way it is portrayed here, when you see that he's from 7 cities. And we have that concept, or not concept, but we have that thing that this idea of male pride and killing the wife, killing partners if you fear that they are cheating on you. That is very often connected to Middle Eastern cultures in a way, at least here in Europe. I probably read too much into this here, but the practice exists, and it obviously also exists in not all other cultures, but in most Western cultures, we also have that point that men cheating on their partners is kind of not expected, but in a way accepted, or I don't know how to say that because I've never done that. But it is judged much more harshly if a woman does it. And the way he's like talking himself into it and justifying it again and again and again is just very much that thing. And that image of him in that hole and trying to climb out, and that hole is closing in further and further around him, is just a very good image for how people justify things to themselves, how we justify things to ourselves, and basically just build that cage around us until we're like closed in our own like fully like own reasoning and own world, basically. So that I felt was a very apt description of how these things work, and obviously they're terrible, and we need to do something about it. Also, what else was in there? I don't know. He almost found himself, the ghost, but only almost so far. So we'll see how that all works out in the end, how that will go. But things are getting closer to some kind of resolution in Kel's rooted, as it were, where our buddy is hanging out. Ikarian is hanging out at the moment. So we'll see how that goes. Then obviously the final bit, and this is another one that I found interesting, is the search for the Sheikh by Sanderlath and Withal. Sanderlath and Withal are another one of those couples where we see how well Erikson can describe dynamics in relationships. I'm not going to say it's a toxic relationship between the two, but it's definitely clear that being in a relationship with someone like Sanderlath through Corlat can take a lot out of a person. And that situation when she first like cares very much for him until she realizes that the blood is not his, but the horse's blood, and then she actually gets super aggressive once again. And he just like the way how Withal switches that abuse that he gets from her. It's like, I'm not going to get physically aggressive here. Other people might have. I'm not going to do that. I'm just saying that we're coming close to the end of my patience, which is gigantic. But just be aware, in that case, I will just walk away. Which, is the only way you can deal with a very aggressive partner in it. Like, because, yes, the idea, like, it's so tempting to become aggressive yourself. It's like, but that only makes the situation worse. And don't do that. So once again, I really appreciate how Stephen Erikson is able to describe, or not, like how he describes ongoing relationships, whether they're like very positive, loving ones or not. But the way he describes mature relationships is pretty unique when it comes to like fantasy fiction, I feel. So there's that. Also, obviously, the Nachts are gigantic demons when they are forced to be, which is pretty cool. But I love the fact that they're still crazy. So there's that. I know that if I ever read, like when I read Carcanas, I will certainly find out more about the Nachts. And I'm looking forward to that because, hey, Jagad, demon, whatever things, that's pretty cool. All right. And let's have a last look at the snake, which is getting more and more brutal once again. And I found one thing there really interesting, because Badal speaks about her Book of the Fallen that no one will read because no one cares, and how that gives her freedom and lets herself feel better if she ever writes it, because you can put all the suffering, all those intense feelings and words that make up her like experience, her personality and stuff. She can put all of that in there. And you can certainly look at how some authors write books, and you really need to put these things out there. And even if you don't expect anyone to read what you've written, or hear what you have said, it's still important that you actually put it out there. And it can make you free in a way to do that. So I'm not going to sit here and claim that what Badal says at this point is Stephen Erickson directly talking to us about his feelings when writing the Book of the Fallen, these 10,000 pages that no one will read, which is roughly what this is. Yeah, but still, I just felt it's interesting to have that there, and you could look at it as this kind of confession, because obviously Badal is the poet, and that I think is, I feel it's one of those things that can help us understand literature and poetry and art in general. So I just feel that's a good way to end it for today. I'll be back tomorrow, maybe. And on Sunday, I guess I'll try to make the mead video. We'll see how that goes. I have 10 kilos of honey, and I have yeast, and I have all the other stuff, and I'll talk about something Vikings. Until then, have a great Friday, and I'll talk to you tomorrow. Until then, cheers.